Arora, who is professor of Inclusive AI Cultures Utrecht University, and she's co-founder of Inclusive AI Lab and Fem Lab. She's an award-winning author, TEDx speaker, Harvard and Columbia University alumni, and she has got frITs, Bussemaker, who's a digital connector, business community builder, keynote speaker, moderator, podcast coach, host. Hind is a top 100 AI ethics women. She has been writing on AI meets Islam, kinetic AI labs. She's a Fulbright legal geopolitical scientist, former lecturer in Fordham University, Citrix UC Berkeley, former visiting scholar of Stanford. So without much ado, I'll invite all three of them. Just give me a minute for doing some logistic stuff, getting them on board. There we go. Cool. I think without much ado, I'll hand it over to you, Payal. Maybe frITs, one of you guys can maybe introduce and then get to the topic. Thank you.
Hi, hello, everybody.
Hello. So frITs, I guess you're muted, by the way, frITs.
Are you okay right now?
Yes, now it's fine. Yes.
For the audience, Payal, Hind, and I decided to turn this into a fireside chat. And I first would like to invite Payal and Hind to briefly, in one line, introduce why they feel they should be part of this panel on global accountability. Payal, may I ask you first to what's your one-liner?
Sure. Being a digital anthropologist, I basically bring insights from the field to design. And I think that's really essential if we want genuine accountability for those who are most impacted.
Okay, thank you. Hind.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. What brings me here? I'm really eager to bring my share to AI ethics discourse and implementation and accountability from global and regional standpoints as founder of AI Meets Islam project. So that was bring me to this conference.
Great. Okay. Welcome. The reason I'm here is twofold. First of all, I chair the Institute for Accountability in the Digital Age, which we set up with UNESCO in 2017. And pure coincidence, in the same year, I also helped set up AI for Good, got the t-shirt on. And I explicitly wore that t-shirt to make people aware, at least my message, it's not about the technology, about people using that technology to use AI for good or for bad. That's my point of view. So far we've talked about whistleblowing, and it's also mentioned that if we have accountability frameworks, we might need less whistleblowers. Hind, maybe I can start with you. What's your take on accountability on a global level? Is that achievable?
Yes, but if we take it from realistic standpoint, from the realistic lens, not just ethics, discourse, and dot. First of all, every time I think about ethics, AI ethics, I always ask myself, already does the word, is it ethical first? From here, I start thinking ethics and really I started breaking down my thinking. I said, there is AI is a gamer and new change maker in geopolitics. This today we leave the race for AI. So if I want to think ethics and implementation of ethics, I have to think for also this geopolitical rates between US and China for the hegemony through technology. and I have to think the place of ethics inside this race. Then from this, I have also to think that AI is a business, and the end of the day is product to sell. So how can we make the business producers AI that technology developers thinking in same time ethics and profits? Engineering ethics can make growth, can make profit. Is not something against the profit itself. Then I have to think the legal standpoint from the global side and multiculturalism level. I don't say globalism versus culturalism. No, is thinking global while you take into consideration regional awareness. This is why I established and I found AI meets Islam for this reason to participate, and I encourage other cultures to do so. And I have also to think AI and ethics through North and South, between countries that produce this technology and countries that just consume and receive this technology. Who will account who, how, who we should held responsible? And the end lens for me should be practical, is a thinkable and methodic strategy to implement ethics through accountability and transparency. We need sanctions. We need a chain of responsibility. Everybody should be held responsible, and then we create an auditing system based on chain of responsibility. So for me, we cannot think accountability without thinking all those dimensions, and thinking also of the language. If I think a charter, or a bill of accountability, for me, it should be adjustable and profitable in same time, because it's about business too. So we need to think both dimensions, and having a kind of evolutive bills, because we need to take into consideration the risk and managing risk. Why? AI technology is going faster. That's why while we just sitting thinking and discussion ethics. So we need also into these bills a part that is open, evolutive. Why? This part will be just dedicated to risk. Then here we put anticipation and managing risk. So in general, this how I think AI ethics and accountability.
Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts on there and giving us I would say, a direction for possible solutions. Payal, what's your take on accountability on a global level?
Yeah, Hind, I think what you're saying is dead on. I completely agree with that. But, I definitely basically position when we think about accountability as accountability for whom and also on what matters, right? And this is where you see tensions between the North and the South. And indeed, we need to think, I agree that, we need global standards, we need global systems, but we need to think in regional or even sub-regional, right? Because it's not like there's an India system. There's also like at a municipality level, we have to go into the granularity, and there's differences in states or in every single country, right? But that's not the point. Is the point is that when we think about accountability, and I agree with you, frITs, is that we need to think more in terms of prevention. So we need less and less whistleblowing as a phenomena, and that should be a real goal, is mitigate as much as possible on that. So that means we need to do things by default. We need to talk about systems that actually are already not just ethical but actionable, right? So and enforceable. So I think, and that has to be a sort of a nurtured loop. But it starts off with what does this all mean? I mean, I'm a media anthropologist. Basically, I do a lot of user experience work, and it's
Let's
about
explain,
engaging. Sorry.
well, maybe explain to the audience what that involves for those.
Yeah. So
Well, but that is
basically, I've spent about 2 decades, working and examining how, looking at how young people in India, Brazil, Kenya, and many other parts of the global south use digital media in their everyday lives. How do they hack it? How do they circumvent it? But not just from a user perspective, but also the laborers involved, right? So when people talk about accountability, you also have to be accountable to the ones who are data labelers, the ones who are content moderators. A lot of actually, we need to map out the chain of workers across board. So when I'm sitting in Amsterdam, and oftentimes when people are talking about, oh, we need accountable systems, and we're talking about the workers, it's like an iceberg. Actually, they just see workers at a very small sliver, but who are documented, who are very visible, who have agency, who are part of unions, and not the majority of the laborers that don't get accounted for. And actually, there are dual systems, right? So oftentimes, say in Europe, look at like in the prior episodes, like on WhatsApp, right? They will have a different policy for Europeans and different policy for the rest of the world because you can get away with it, right? So the fact is that we need to push against these double standards because we need to genuinely think about for whom should we be accountable to, which is not just users, but also the back-end laborers, in terms of fair and ethical work, decent work, the kind of burnouts they're having. I mean, the nature of whistleblowing takes on very different forms, right? And it's not just that, oh, they've stolen our data. There's so many layers to what are the problems. And as we expand the variety of people who are involved and who are most subjected to the harms, we start to think about whistleblowing in much more pluralistic ways than we typically have in our mind, right? So one small example before I hand it over to you, Fritz, is like when we talk about, the biases. Oh, this is terrible how algorithms are biased, right? And that these computer scientists, people have this image that there's a small group of computer scientists who have developed this entire system and they've put all their like biases into it. But actually, a lot of it gets outsourced. And when you talk to these average people who are doing small little bits of coding, they have no idea what they're coding for. Like in many parts, whether it's the Philippines and etc., they're just doing this tiny little bit. They don't have oversight. So should accountability be about transparency and oversight? What are you building these systems for, right? Who are you actually expressing the accountability to? How much information do you share, right? And so I think that really matters because, firstly, you may not even have the chance to even say that you're doing something wrong because you don't know what you're doing. You don't, it's just a job. So I think there's some sort of reckoning about, what is, it goes back to what do we mean by whistleblowing for us to even build a system of, accountability. So.
Wow, some big thoughts here from both of you, to be honest. Now, I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, and I want to point to the website of the OECD. The OECD has a catalog of tools and metrics for trustworthy AI. And when it was first set up, it had about 250 tools in the system. And I'm looking at the website right now. Any idea how many tools they have right now? And we're talking about a couple of years later.
No.
939 tools. So my observation is the number of tools we have to regulate AI, to create trustworthy AI, we have more than enough. We have over 3 tools per country to implement. And I realize it has implications on culture and industry, but the fact that we have a growing number of tools, for me, is more symptom that we're not fixing what we should be fixing. So it's not about creating the tools. It's a completely other discussion we should be having. I'm just wondering what your take is on from both of you on the fact that we already have that many tools to select from.
I love that. It reminds me of I was working with UNESCO sometime back and at this event, and It was there was this price-based incentives for developing AI for good apps, etc., right? And the problem with that is that, you know, you land up having everyone compete, right? And create like 100 gazillion tiny solutions, but they're built for failure. It's almost like gig thing. Once the money dries out, it becomes part of the cemetery of apps. And I feel the same thing is with tools, you know, these toolkits, it becomes a sort of a way in which you get money, you nod to the problem, and then it disappears. And also, by the way, currently I'm on a project, another one of the European massive projects on AI ethics. There's like 100, as when we started, 196 AI ethics manifestos, right?
Yeah.
So we don't need manifestos. We don't need more tools. We don't need, I mean, so the question is actually, and maybe this goes back to Hind, perhaps, is that, you know, Hind, you talked about, you know, the global, right? Like how we need it. But the question is, how do we do this? Because it's as if we are, you know, reproducing in our silos the same thing, and it's not coming together. It's so I'm really curious if you've seen you know, a point where people have been able to band together, you know.
Hind, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. Look, for me, any manifesto or any bill that does not lead to an effective and efficient implementation and impact, that stayed just like, you know, black and white. Oh, that's good. Maybe that was their work. Depends on the aims, depends on how much they understand all the connection between the whole doubts. But for me, if there is no impact from all those manifestos, it doesn't mean that we should stop. Maybe we should review them, critics what is missing, what is not missing, but the main thing for me is the implementation and understanding why the implementation is so slow again, because we need to go back to this context of AI race. Powers are looking for states are looking for more powers. The business tycoons, they are looking to make more profit, and because today's states also are collaborating, are making their hegemony race through the multinationals, companies, etc. So the last thing for them is really the ethics manifesto or implementation. They run as faster as much as they can to just to gain this technology war between them. So, and developers also, they don't want to hand tight through implementation or any tools that can really not ban them, but limit their, you know, their field of what they call innovation. Sometimes even the word innovation becomes semantically questionable. Ethics itself is something, what ethics are talking about. This is why we need to bring this regional and sub-regional, that's why I call it multiculturalism, and after that you dig more when you get into details. So manifesto with no roadmap of implementation, and you engaged everybody, multi-stakeholders, from the state to the users to the small workers that Payal mentioned. If I'm coding something small, I have to ask the person that sent me this work, I'm coding for what? What am I doing? Some people, they will say sometimes they belong, those small coders belongs also to poor. There is also social economic conditions. If they ask, they could be rejected. So they say, okay, why should I ask? So we have multi layers of complexity that we need to tackle and talk about it freely and openly to have an outputable AI ethics roadmap. Because yes, everybody should be held accountable, but at different level and different size. The main company or the head of the whole coders will not be the small coders, will not be the users, will not be, you know, the finance, the person who finance, the person who marketize, etc. But we need this chain of responsibility.
Okay. Point taken. And in your this presentation, you triggered me a thought I wanted to share with you guys in the audience and just get your take on this. A small anecdote. A couple of years ago, I had the possibility to ask a question to Newt Gingrich. He was in The Hague, and we were at the Dutch Parliament. We had about 150 people in the room, and I asked him, what is your take on accountability in a digital age? And he's a lawyer by background. And for people who don't know Newt Gingrich, he's a former Speaker of the House in the United States. And he gave it a second of thought, and he said, well, it's just like any other innovation out there. It's just like, and he started to talk about, okay, when we invented the car, we didn't have any traffic rules. And it took us about 10 years to develop the rules, the traffic rules, along with the development of the car. So his take was, hey, what's new? It's just another innovation. And what I found surprising, given I have an IT background, was that in the room of 150 people, well over 100, I saw nodding. Yeah, I agree. That's a good approach. What's different? And I saw the people who I'd say have are more IT savvy, looking very concerned because we don't have that time. So my issue is, and some other people who also backed up, like Michael Rogers, the former head of the NSA in the States, who said, technology is moving so fast that the legal and regulatory framework cannot keep up with. So if we want to regulate this technology, we are trying to regulate a 21st century issue with 18th, 17th century tools being the rule of law. So we should look at other type of solutions outside the rule of law to regulate the technology. Any thoughts on that? Because what I saw there was ignorance, not understanding how fast everything's going. That was my point sharing that story. So
I think it's a great story, and indeed, I don't know, Hind. I mean, since I've gone before, do you want to go first? I think it's
I agree totally. We need to think out of the box. And this is why I said in the bills, we need a part dedicated to risk management and anticipation. That's the only way today we can just reduce this space, between running just behind the technology. Okay, they are running fast, but we can anticipate. So you go through anticipation and risk management, and you bring all the whole, international lawyers. Why? Because with international law, we all the time have unprecedented situations, and we need also to act bravely and in a manner that is also innovative. You sometimes we don't need to wait to go through this approval of bills or something. Today we need to force the state to open a new flexible doors quick to adopt something that ran fast. If I stay 3-6 months waiting for, I don't know, l'Assemblée Générale in France, or I don't know, like the Congress, that just to approve one bill, and after that I discover that it's become outdated. No, I need today something. If this is something, you enforce it. You enforce it through media. You enforce it through, societal discourse. We need out of the box tools and way to walk also faster and to manage this distance between the technology and legalist society, etc. And through the risk and education with formal or informal civil society, artists, schools, academia, non-academia, everybody should participate to create this awareness. Once the awareness is created, even the developers, they will start thinking, they will say, oh, behind us, there is society that is aware, so we cannot just easy move to the next step. They will start calculating and thinking. And in same time, inviting those technologies developers to sit and create a dialogue. Engineering ethics can make growth.
Okay. And good points. Payal, you want to add on this or
Yeah, actually, absolutely. I think you have really identified this perspective of culture, a culture of practice. Because just because you can do something doesn't mean people will do it if we come up with a critical mass that pushes against a particular culture of practice and then normalizes. Like, for example, like just think about in the past when mobile phones. I remember when mobile phones first came, right? I was in India, I'm from Bangalore, and we went to the movie theater, and people weren't putting their ringers off. They were like answering the phone call during the movie. And very quickly, I would say within a few like months, it became a no-go. Nobody sent out a memo. It wasn't a legal thing that you can't use it. There hadn't actually been any rules in place. But there's a critical mass of people who felt this is ruining our experience of this particular moment and that we believe in the value of switching it off, right? And this is just an example of how do we need to establish a culture of practice where people value certain kinds of behaviors and it sets precedent. But I do want to, like, I think you're bringing, I do want to pick with that example because there's some fundamental points we need to unpack here. One being is that, in Europe and the US, law is really, very much at the center of accountability, right? In the most of the world, they don't take law in that kind of a serious manner because they don't believe it works for them, right? Most people will not go to lawyers, right? Most people don't see it as a genuine resort to, gaining justice. So I think we have to understand that laws oftentimes have been built to establish and maintain power, not to protect those who are, the most vulnerable. And that kind of culture and mindset towards legality, and trust is actually something that we are starting from. And we tend to take our Western assumption of the way we look at law and impose it, and we expect the same kind of mindset across board. So we're starting in two different places. And the other is, I think it's kind of, I hear this a lot. Oh, regulation is basically it should be catching up and it's always behind, lagging behind innovation. And it's like, yes, what do you expect? Do you want people to regulate something that has not become what it is? Of course, a new technology becomes what it is after it has user practice across the different parts of the world. So it's not that regulators are unimaginative or not fast enough. There's a reason why they're not fast enough. They're not meant to be fast. They're meant to be sustainable. They're two different things. Innovators move fast. Regulators have to move slower because they need to think systematically about long-term impacts. They need to think about, can we give this tool breathing room in different contexts and cultures? Because how can we believe that we know the answers? When the internet came up, whoever was behind the creating of the internet, could they have foreseen what it would have done? Of course not, because the beauty of technology is it plays out in the most beautiful different forms as well as the most perverse, right? And we definitely see the harms. But we don't have that kind of foresight because human ingenuity, creates new kinds of problems and solutions. So I think that itself, it's not the fault of being slower. It is the nature of the beast. It's about having a close relationship And it's about the detail of intervening at the right point, at the right thing, and taking it into account a variety of different harms and practices of opportunities across different borders, right? And that's where we should be channeling our energies, right?
Payal, excellent point. Hind, you want to add to this? Otherwise, I want to move on to the next question I have for us, actually. Hind or not? Okay.
Excuse me?
No, I thought you wanted to add something to the discussion.
Yeah, quickly,
sure.
I want to add to Payal thoughts that when we talk also about the legal side, we're not really talking about just the practicability of the idea. We're talking about the discourse, legal discourse itself. Definitely, any legal system to be sustainable, that you need to think it. But first of all, you need a whole debate coming from the whole parts of the society, policy decision makers, philosopher, academia, media, etc. Then you put sets of sustainable legal systems. So, but definitely what we need also with this new generation, I do believe that the coming generation of tech developers maybe will be more ethical. This year I mentor a group of engineers, young, very young, and they told me they were very happy about challenging them with some questions and philosophical questions, etc. And they told me we're never being taught this way. We are taught to create a system, but we don't think after that we create to whom, what is the impact, etc. But now we start incorporating this thinking while we are thinking to develop a system, an IT system. This, for me, should bring applied dialectical course in all engineering schools.
Yeah.
That's it.
Fully agree with that. I became an engineer almost 40 years ago, and I never once was asked an ethical question because you were doing engineering stuff and the impact on society was not relevant. Yeah, I want to introduce a following discussion with you, again with a small anecdote. When we organized the inaugural summit in the Peace Palace in The Hague for the Institute for Accountability, I had Gary Shapiro on the line, and Gary is the chair of the CTA, the organization who organized the CES in Las Vegas. So his organization organizes, I think, the biggest trade show almost in the world. And I asked Gary, we're organizing this event with UNESCO and the ITU. Do you want to come over and share your thoughts? And he immediately said, look, if I come to Europe, I'm going to come to an environment where we're going to have a government-led legislation. And I come from the States, and we want an industry-led legislation. And so my reply was, well, Gary, realize you're coming to The Hague, which is a UN city. So your point of view is going to be just as relevant as the point of view of everybody else we're going to invite. So what I was observing at the time, that facing exactly the same issue, how we're going to regulate, different cultures come up with different solutions to that issue. So making that observation, what is your take? Who should be at the table? And is there an entity in this world we can invite, point to, like, hey, can we help ask you to organize this accountability, specifically on an international level? Because it's good to talk about, okay, we should do this, but can we make it one step concreter? Is there an entity? Which are the stakeholders to make certain that we get where we all want to go to?
Yeah, I mean, basically, actually, I think I brought that up at the beginning, is that there's a wide variety of stakeholders who are most impacted. So one, we can talk about who are the stakeholders who have the most power, and that's typically who gets in the room, right? Because they're the ones who are building these tools, or they're the ones who are the policymakers, or a variety of, like, they're like the key actors. But the ones who are the most impacted often are not even on the map because people don't see them as a stakeholder. So first is recognizing the power inequity in, majority of people who actually are going to be impacted disproportionately, but and actually shouldn't also be sitting in the room, because it's not shouldn't be on their shoulders to resolve this. It should be on ours, because we have the rare platform to, and the kind of the privilege of time, effort, resources to be able to, do this. But we do need to actively listen and to be able to authentically represent their interests, because we can't, like, if you look at the development movements of the 70s and all, they talked about participatory action. And so they put the onus and the burden on, say, the user, on those who are the most impacted. And it didn't work because people are already overburdened in these contexts, right? So I think that's one very important point, I would say, in respect about who bears that burden, right? And the other thing is, actually, we should look at accountability not as a, I think it's tempting. It's the same thing with regulation. Like, it has such bad PR, like, maybe we should take a page from what Hind is saying, right? About, let's shift the culture of practice and culture of thinking. Accountability and regulation also can get the market to work again. So I sit on the digital economy board in India, where it's for the last 3 years. And I find it very interesting is where they are like invested in making the market work again. So they're doing something interesting where they've partnered with Proces, which is Nasper based in Amsterdam, actually, and which is a venture capital company. So it's a unique collaboration between one of the biggest venture capital companies in the world for emerging markets and a government state, right, in shaping policy, shaping regulation. And why? Because they see regulation closely tied to opportunity. And that makes sense, because you want the market to start working again. And it only will work when it has an even playing field. And you want things to be fair, equitable, because they need to also be at the receiving end in a fair manner. So I think it needs a little bit of a rebranding, shall we say, a little PRing, but also it's a real shift in culture of practice that no, accountability and regulation is not a stick, it's actually a carrot. If you recognize that it is giving a whole host of freedoms for a wider group of people, if we do it right with the right guardrails, and we have to do that mind shift, right?
I like that thinking. And anything to add to that?
Yeah, I will emphasize my thought on having applied dialectical thinking with all those IT developers, technology developers. When I talk about accountability, I don't talk about this concept just from the small legal window. For me, it's a philosophical concept, and it is part of ethics. And also, once you are accountable, that means you are transparent, that means you will have clean and hygienic data, that means you can make more profits. You can make more profits if you respect this attitude. Let's take it as thought, as thinking, and as attitude in same time. Is not something that it's like, is accountability is like sanction. It's not sanction, it's a value. It's a value if you embrace it in your business, because we should not forget AI is a business, is a market. People are looking, are racing each others, are competing each others in national level and also in international market. Everybody is running to global market. Everybody want to globalize their products. But okay, you are welcome, do it. We encourage you. We're not against or we want to ban innovation technology, but when you yourself, you account yourself before even law, and you are transparent, and you ask your engineers to implement ethic in their process, and you start saying, okay, data is, it's it's the horse of AI. So instead of still embracing the social media era based on stealing data today, no, let's recognize our sources, let's make it clean, let's make it hygienic, let's even make the users that from whom we take data take a benefit from their data. Maybe they come to you and gave you their data when they see that you are account and clean and you declare your sources. Maybe you can do something that can balance accountability and benefits and growth. I'm just thinking out loud. You can say, for example, okay, be accountable, clean your data, and we can maybe dedicate that from your tax. More you're clean and transparent, more maybe we can be gentle in terms of tax. But this is not reality in all societies. This is why also I'm talking about emphasizing the regional and sub-regional thinking. I want to just give small example on sometimes the impact of from down to top. I'm not in general supporter of that all decisions should be top down. That means we need state, all those classical key players. No, sometimes we need down to top. Many times just a movie impact sometimes legal reality or social reality or political or economic reality and impacted in really in an effective way, so that we have really many open doors. All what we need is just to start working and start including people and inviting all kind of stakeholders to discuss, because what we want a safer world for all of us, ethical world for all of us, and also benefits and profits for all of us.
Yeah, Hind, both Hind and Payal, I very much appreciate, I think, your call for, say, knowledge, understanding what is behind this. And also in what you said reminded me of the work of a professor called Alex Edmonds. He is a professor in finance at the London Finance School. And he wrote a book called Grow the Pie based on his research to see if there's a relationship between profit and purpose. And he demonstrated that profit and purpose are fully aligned only if the organization takes a longer term perspective. Actually, so being a purposeful company, being an accountable company, in your words, if you take a long perspective, you will be much more profitable, and his research forces that. So for me, this is also, I mean, I'm making a leap by replacing purpose with accountability, but so that might be new research for you, Payal, to support to pursue. But I believe that you are right. If we educate people that accountability is not a stick but a carrot, Payal, as you mentioned, we might get not only the developers and the speakers and the owners of this technology behind this, but much more the general public, the audience who are going to make a decision, are going to be powerful by walking with the feet, by using or not using it, by truly understanding what this technology is going to bring.
Yeah, I mean, and some classic stuff is like, like I'll share this grant, like, for example, what's really crazy is we don't look at the way this grant that I put in the chat is, right? It's like Gen AI for Africa, okay? And I was asked to be part of it. The thing, and the reason I'm bringing this up is, again, this is like, we know this for decades. It's sort of colonial thinking that we have all the answers and we're going to disseminate our wisdom to, the blank canvases of the global south, and then that sort of logic is so deeply baked into the mindset, is that you will actually come up with a grant today in 2025, which has this logic that Europe has built Gen AI tools, and now we're going to engage and map stakeholders on how they can learn from Europe. And let us then disseminate it. And let's back it with money, millions and millions. And I find that so deeply arrogant. And this is at the heart of it. We still look at the us and the them. It's still baked into it. We think we have all the answers. Europe thinks they are the kings and queens of regulation. and they don't think, and in the US, they think they are, I mean, they have like reached this whole bullying status that we are the most powerful, so we can get our way. We don't need a global community. So you have these two like forces at play, and you have the rest of the world saying, screw you, because we're not what we used to be in the 40s, post-colonial times. We are actually coming up with a lot of our own national-based data repositories. We're creating our own kinds of alliances which are circumventing these powers, these groups. So what's happening is there are going to be, the way I envision it, is going to be like these trans-regional sort of regulations, trans-regional systems of accountability. If we don't rein in the hubris, and understand that, yes, you may have the most money, you may have the most resources, but guess what? 90% of the world's population lives in the global south. That number is power. And the power from different kinds of storytelling, setting a culture of practice, and pushing for momentum, because it's about, we have to hone in that, I think. And that, yes, they're cheap laborers, but they're also laborers who can, if they come up in a critical mass to decide to do a certain thing, they can shift the way data labeling takes place. They can shift the way data is built and disseminated. So, it's really, I think really we have to, it seems like it's such a sticky thing, and it's not innovative. It's very boring stuff. I've heard every decade the same shit. Like I was so shocked by this grant, and this is what I mean. Like, we don't need new solutions. We need to, double down, because some of these things just persist generation after generation and get lived through policy design,
That's
and we really had to break out of it.
that's a cultural shift. And in the dying moments of this session, I'm very pleased that we also touched on what the Global South can do. I realize there's somebody who has a question for us as panelists, Dr. Data. I don't know what the question is. Maybe can turn the phone on. So the microphone on. So in the last 2 minutes, Sean, can we at least get
yes.
that question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Fritz. And in case if there are any questions, if you guys can raise your hands, I can just get you to the stage. Otherwise, you can also post a question in the chat. Okay. I'll just invite Dr. Ruchira.
Yeah.
Okay. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, 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 Ruchira.
All right, thank you for these, for both, or actually, yeah, all the panelists so far this morning. I had a question for these panelists. So I am a data scientist. I have bachelor's degrees and a PhD in math and a master's in computer science. And the only ethics course that I was required to take, it so happened that I was doing postdoc in computational biology. And by the NIH, I was required to take a course in responsible conduct of research, which I took with Professor Charlie Gross of Princeton, who was visiting Berkeley at the time. And that was very enlightening and illuminating, and it was a great course. And I'm glad that I was required to take it, but that was not in any curriculum that I was required to take during my education in math and computer science. Now, it may be that some universities do have ethics courses that that people who are going into software engineering or into development of AI are required to take, but my guess is that it's probably very uneven. So what would you suggest? The course that I took was actually, it was not very long, and it was very it was several weeks, and it was very illuminating in a short period of time. So what would you suggest is the minimal kind of course about human subjects and how to how we should we as technology developers should learn to take responsibility and be accountable?
Thank you. Payal, can I ask you to briefly answer that question, because I realize we're out of time?
Yes, I mean, thanks. That's a very good question. And I think basically the good point here is that we are in a different time. Computer scientists are increasingly aware and are getting more, actually taking leadership. In fact, we are like, for example, what they're looking at is not just ethics, but as a course to take, but an ongoing community of practice, because these ethical issues and challenges are ongoing. It's not like, oh, now that I've done this, I can move ahead. You're going to encounter it. So what I see is that we are creating this collective where we can run through, certain kinds of dilemmas and decision making. And I think that is really important. But it is happening now. It's not just about following particular kind of manuals. It's actually creating new kinds of ways in which uh, you know computation can also be in alignment with the values. And I think we need to actually map out all these kinds of efforts. I mean, we do this at the Inclusive AI Lab, where a number of computer scientists are deliberately paired with philosophers of tech, and because they're both extremely granular in their disciplines, and to be able to sync it in ways to resolve, because the reality is there's always a dilemma. There's always a tension and risk. And we always, it's not a pure moral sort of approach that there are winners and losers. And I think we have to actually grapple with it. And the question is, how do you grapple with it as a community? It shouldn't be shouldered on an individual alone. And let's not reinvent the wheel, right? So.
Payal, thank you so much. Hind, I'm looking at Sean, given the fact that we've run well over time.
I have one sentence.
Yeah,
I have one
just
sentence
go ahead.
for the course.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. For the course, through my experience, when I mentored the engineers, and also being an interdisciplinary scholar, definitely, as I said, all engineer school today mandatory. They need applied dialectical course based on thinking strategy of applied ethics to engineer. It's not just to learn, but to engineer, which means to put into practice. That's it.
Thanks a lot. So I think that's phenomenal. Thank you. And I just want to add, in fact, it was a great conversation, which was talking about Global Accountability Charter. I think all frITs, Payal, Hind are coming from different parts of the world, Spain, Europe, many other different parts of the world. And I think they are talking about this Global Accountability Charter draft for the ethics industry, AI industry from the ethical context is a great conversation. So I think without much ado, thanks a lot for taking time out of your schedule. I think this is a late evening for many of you. Thanks a lot. Sincerely appreciate on a very short notice, you guys all have come together. And despite multiple dissuading efforts from those larger forces, you guys have been staying with us. And thanks a lot. Sincere thanks.
Yeah.
And thank you, frITs, for moderating and taking all this initiative. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Sean, for bringing us on board.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Payal. Thank you, frITs. Yeah, I enjoyed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great discussion and great moderation, frITs. Thank you, Payal. Bye for the interaction. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And without much ado, I'm going to get